Star Trek, The Nerdy Frontier. These are the discussions of the Good Times Society. Their continuing mission to explore each episode, to seek out new topics and ridiculous observations, to boldly watch what they've already watched before. My name's Jake Michels. I'm your host, along with Becca Scott.
I'll say my own name into the microphone.
Well, you haven't said it yet. And Xander Jeanneret.
Ensign Xander Jeanneret reporting for duty.
So you have two pips up on
Oh,
your...
so yeah, I'm lieutenant then.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't know I was going to get Trek checked right off the bat.
Xander is the Trekkie among us who has a comms button on his lapel badge. I'm getting Trek checked, which is a phrase I just learned.
I just want to help you.
Thank you. No, please, Trek check up and down.
Well, let's actually start with the basis of how much we do know about Star Trek.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Becca, let's actually start with you. Like, what's your experience with Star Trek?
Well, hi, I'm Becca Scott. I am a podcaster.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's my bio. And
What's your Star Trek bio?
My Star Trek bio is I watched it when it originally came out.
In 1965 or 66?
No, the Next
Next
Gen.
Gen.
When did Next Gen come out?
1987 was, I believe, the first season.
Right.
Oh, then I watched reruns with my mom.
Yeah.
Well, but it still aired like up until like 95 or something like that.
Yeah, and it was in syndication on ABC for a long time.
Well, the truth is I haven't seen it since then, except for the episodes when Data goes back in time, because I just randomly turned those on one day. And when he
Was
goes,
it a fistful of datas? Like it was a Western?
Yeah, it was a Western.
Oh my
He
God.
plays
Yeah.
poker.
Good episode.
Yeah, it was actually a double-parter. I think Whoopi's in it.
Yes.
Anyway, that's what I know about Next Gen. Vague recollections
You've got it, though.
of under 10 years old. But my mom was very, very into Next Gen. And I've seen all the movies.
Wow.
All the new movies, all the Next Generation movies?
Anything with Patrick Stewart in it.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
impressive.
Well, and all the new movies,
So a lot of your
course.
observations are going to be kind of comparing your childhood memories to some of these episodes and your
Which is
current...
legit.
And your current take on it.
Sure. I don't know that I have that many
Because you don't
memories.
remember it that much.
I mean, there's a sort of like, oh, yeah. Every time. These are characters that we all think about and are in the collective unconscious all the time. So it's not like I ever forgot about Deanna Troi.
Oh, yeah.
I have so much to say about Deanna Troi, but I'll hold on to it for now.
Well, so actually, I think I'll go next because I actually have about like the next step up of experience. So I also watched TNG just like you when it was in reruns and also still coming on the air. So I think I started watching around the same time, and I have a pretty distinct memory of a fair amount of these episodes. I don't think I watched all of them, but I'd say I at least probably saw like 70 to 90%.
Oh, wow.
So I will definitely remember certain moments, and I definitely remember this episode, Encounter at Farpoint.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's a big one.
Oh my gosh, the saucer separation.
Yeah.
Okay, but before we do, let's
Yes.
talk about you, Xander Jeanneret,
Yeah.
because you know a lot about Star Trek.
You do?
Well, it's the thing. The thing is, like, I didn't for a long time. I grew up watching it with my dad, who was really into it, and I hated it. When I was a kid, I thought Deanna Troi was stupid. I was like, there doesn't need to be a counselor and a starship. There needs to be more weapons. I want more lasers and fighting and da-da-da.
You were anti-mental health back then.
I was.
Okay,
I just
great.
wanted action, and I didn't get it. And then I lost my dad to cancer when I was 15, and so I sort of locked that away, type of thing.
Yeah.
Then I did a reality show called King of the Nerds, and through that, I started talking to people who were very, very passionate about Star Trek. And I was like, I don't know, this was this thing that from my childhood I didn't really care about, didn't really like. And then Netflix happened.
Yeah.
And I got suddenly access to everything. So I was like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. So I started with the original series and I watched all of it.
The original series?
Well, I watched all of the original series. I watched Next Gen. I watched Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise,
so you did it all
animated series.
chronologically in terms of its release. So you have.
I wanted to have that experience.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
You did it right.
Well, yeah, I did it away, but I don't want to discourage anyone from getting into Trek because there's a lot. But anywhere can be your access point. You just, like you said, watching Fistful of Datas is amazing, and it's wherever you have fun with it. That's where you kind of connect with Trek. For me, I found that now as an adult, I connect with it way more, and I get it.
Yeah.
And it helps me sort of connect with my dad in a way of like the things that he believed in, and it's sort of a way that I can tap into that.
That's really great.
Right?
I love that. Well, Trek means so much to different people. And
Yeah.
for those of you listening, whether you have never seen an episode
Right.
of Star Trek or if you're a huge fan and you have a lot of corrections to give us, either way, wherever you are in that range, we're happy to bring you along for this journey with us as we go through the entirety of the Next Generation.
Absolutely. We're giving people a portal, if
Yes.
you will, what's it
Wormhole?
called when they go blue and fuzzy and
transport.
we're giving people a transportation hub
Pad,
Oh, man. The footnotes are just growing by the minute.
I'm learning. I learned very quickly.
great. Your ignorance is a
like
gift.
an android.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing in that I'm so excited for you, and I find this with Dungeons and Dragons. I find that with anything that I'm passionate about, I get so excited to introduce these things to my friends and people that I know will love it. And I know you're going to love this.
I know that the production value will continue to increase, and that's what I'm excited about.
I was impressed.
There's a lot of impressive things about this. In
Yeah.
fact, before we get into the full episode, let's actually talk about Next Generation real quick and explain what it is. Because the original series, it was the show from the middle of the 60s to like 67 to 69.
William
I think.
Shatner.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So that show was popular, but it was canceled and got more popular once it was in syndication.
I think a lot of people forget this or overlook it, but Star Trek, the original series, only has 3 seasons.
Yeah, it's
and it's just
short
the
show.
same thing played over and over again.
But
it
when
was,
you talk like this, it fills a lot of air.
that's the thing is the pacing of the original series is tough to get through because it's very slow and very much like the older style of television.
They're kind of a slow mysteries in a lot of them, as I recall, right?
I remember props made of cardboard.
Yes. Yeah, it's a lot of physical props. And the thing is, I'll go into this in this one too, but in the original series, like the rumor was that they didn't really have a budget because it was this offbeat sci-fi show. So they would take costumes and sets from whatever was around and be like, oh, these are aliens. Why are they all dressed like 1920s mobsters? Well, this planet is full of 1920s. And
That's
so they
amazing.
just used whatever they had. Doctor Who was doing the same thing over in the UK. They would just use whatever they had and like, this is an alien now.
I feel like Doctor Who props tend to come out of some British man's apartment. He's like, okay, this lamp is good enough to be a transporter.
So what household product was a Dalek originally?
I bet it was a plunger and a wastebasket turned upside down.
Yep.
Someone going into a cup like, exterminate.
After it goes into syndication, it rises in popularity. Like the conventions happen, and the cast can make a small career out of like going to these things.
I've
right?
talked to people that have gone to the original like conventions, and they're like, it was a small hotel in the middle of Wisconsin that you just show up, and there's a table with William Shatner, and you just talked for a bit, and then they played an episode.
That's so crazy.
And it was like 40 people, and that's it. I was like, that's mind-boggling to think about now.
And then it turns out aliens actually see the broadcast, real aliens from outer space, and assume. Yeah, I'm talking about the documentary Galaxy Quest.
What a great parody of Star Trek in general, right? Because
it's beautiful.
It opens up that fourth wall in terms of like what the actors went through and like how their careers were defined by that.
Yep.
Patrick Stewart is an incredible actor. I mean, I know him as Macbeth for the BBC, but Sir Patrick Stewart is always Captain Picard to most people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was telling Jake earlier, 2, maybe 3 years ago, I was able to go to Star Trek Las Vegas, which is like a big Star Trek convention. And they had Patrick Stewart and like the whole, like Gates McFadden and Marina Sirtis, like everybody was guests there. And they would give panels where they would just talk and they would dish about behind the scenes. But one of the things that Patrick Stewart talks about is like, he's like, I'm so sick of Earl Grey tea. Everybody brings it. Please stop bringing me tea.
It's not the most attractive of the teas.
No.
It's pretty boring.
Yeah.
So
It's super British, though.
as it gets popular, they try to make another Star Trek called Star Trek Phase 2. It doesn't happen. It gets
Never
caught
heard
up
of
in,
that.
because it never aired. It got caught up in development hell, and eventually the scripts for it, one of them got turned into Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which happened in I think 79 or so.
And some people like to call that Star Trek the non-motion picture because it is slow.
I've never seen that one.
You don't need to.
But then eventually there was enough push to get it back onto TV, and the Next Generation happened. So in 1987, we got Encounter at Farpoint, which is what we're talking about today.
Now I'm asking a stat that I know is not in front of you, but maybe we can look it up. How big was this original airing?
That's a great question.
A huge cult following that was just dying to watch it live the first time it was broadcast.
Here's the thing that I know that the execs didn't have a clear idea of who the audience was for this. Because original Star Trek, it was a lot of kids that loved it, that grew up in the 60s and are now adults in the 90s, right? Or the late 80s, early 90s. But the appeal for them in the 60s was that they were kids. So now they're like, do we appeal to the nostalgia of the adults, or is this a kids show?
No, adult nostalgia all the way.
Well, they kind of split the difference with the introduction of Wesley Crusher. They had a vehicle for a kid who could watch and be a part of the thing. Didn't work on me.
You know, yeah, it didn't work on me either. I don't think it worked on anybody because they kind of rode too much in the middle. They played neither side.
But then they picked a side, and it was adults.
Yeah, which I think was the right choice.
I think so, too.
But Will Wheaton was the right choice for casting.
What a heartthrob.
Will, if you're listening, we love you.
Yeah.
I did pull it up on Wikipedia, however accurate this is. I know it has footnotes. The show was broadcast on both 98 independent stations and 112 network affiliates. Overall, it aired to an audience of 27 million people.
Dang!
The show was immediately called the highest-rated syndicated one-hour drama series on television.
Holy cow!
So I think it actually
That's
was
incredible.
highly viewed, yeah. And they put it in a good time slot. I think it was like prime time.
Well, I can feel in my bones, I feel an emotion that we are going to get into the episode soon. But I just want to say, just overall, how crazy that is that 27 million people watched, which sounds like to me like a Game of Thrones level of audience.
Yeah.
Right.
And yet the production quality and storytelling of those two things are so vastly different.
Well, we have to remember this is a pilot. But anyway, the show was pretty popular and it spawned into 7 seasons. So let's just talk about episode 1 Encounter at Farpoint.
Right. Oh, before we get too far into that,
No,
though,
we're so far
I
into
want
it,
to talk
so
about
yeah.
casting, because you talked about Patrick Stewart, right?
Well, we should probably, in case people haven't watched in many years,
Yeah.
of course we all know Patrick Stewart, but maybe when we refer, you can refresh us on
Captain Picard.
character names and actor names, because every other name that you threw out, I don't know.
Gotcha. So Sir Patrick Stewart plays Jean-Luc Picard, the captain of the U.S.S. Enterprise D. But originally, they weren't sure about his baldness.
Oh, it
He was
works.
a fantastic actor. Like, they saw him perform, I think it was a Shakespeare play that they saw him perform on stage, and they're like, yes, this is what we want. This is this energy. We really wanted him to have a French accent because they wanted Jean-Luc Picard, and then they wanted him to have hair. So there's like test footage of him with this wig that they tried to pull off. Yeah, that's it on Google.
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
No way.
That was the Picard that we almost got, and it was with a French accent and everything. Yeah.
If
And
you
I'm sure he
guys
could have pulled
don't
it
have
off.
access to the show notes, it's pretty much Patrick Stewart with like
If
a
you could
dad
describe
haircut.
what you see.
It's a receded hairline. It kind of
The line is pretty good for like a lace front.
it really resembles some actor that plays a dad.
Malcolm in the Middle.
Oh, Bryan Cranston?
Bryan Cranston.
Yeah, it is that.
Young Bryan Cranston.
Yeah.
Before he also was baldly Heisenberg.
There was this weird prejudice against like a bald man being the captain,
Yes.
whereas like William Shatner was kind of considered a beefcake, right?
Right.
So
he comes out in the episode, and you see it full on. They don't hide it, and they make a point of like, this captain has a bit of hair, but mostly it's bald, and this is a strong, in charge, like kind of curmudgeonly man.
he looks great.
He looks great, and in the panel, Patrick Stewart said like people came up to him immediately that were bald and were like, "Thank you."
That's awesome.
Finally, we have someone on television that looks like me, and I
Yeah.
feel sexy, and I never do because I'm bald, and like no one else was doing that.
Yeah, not until Major Dad was that revolution.
He
Right?
turned bald into the sex symbol that it is today.
And that it is today. Him, Bruce Willis, they had it all down.
Yeah.
And they were in some like tight uniforms.
They were.
too.
They talked about that. They petitioned to get like the looser uniforms in the later seasons because you couldn't do anything.
Well, you can tell their posture's a little like rough because they're standing up very straight, but it looks strained because the spandex or whatever it is pulling on their back.
Absolutely.
Also, it's probably super hot under those lights in that material.
and those that didn't breathe at all. You could
Yeah.
tell.
Hey, guess what? I don't care about any of that. I like them in spandex.
It's true. They look great.
Well, if we're going to start with the episode and we're going to start with costumes.
Yes.
Our first scene, I believe, is on the bridge.
Yeah.
And you very quickly meet Counselor Deanna Troi
Yes.
in her goddamn uniform mini skirt and high boots. What is that about, Xander?
I would love to talk about this.
I'm sure you
This
would.
is one of my favorite things.
I'm very conflicted about it.
Okay, you're gonna love this. Maybe in the '60s. So Gene Roddenberry is the person that kind of helmed Star Trek. Right? He's kind of the one that wrote the whole thing. He's the one that got it started in the 60s and is still involved with it to this day. There's an amazing story about him on an airplane. I think he was a pilot. You could look it up. Definitely look it up. But anyway, he's now involved with the Next Generation as well. And so he's all for equality. He's the one that's pushing the envelope forward.
Lieutenant Uhura,
Yes.
back in the day,
Yeah.
black woman on screen with the first interracial kiss.
Exactly.
I know some trivia.
That's exactly right. And Uhura was wearing that skirt because the network was pushing for sexy and they wanted something that would sell, right?
Oh my God.
So when it comes to Next Generation, we have what's called the Skant Uniform. So it looks like a mini skirt type of thing, but in especially this first episode, they make it a point to show that men and women wear the Skant.
What?
Yeah.
When were my eyes closed?
Oh my God, you have to watch again.
There's actually a scene where when they are separating the saucer, there's a crowd scene, and there's one officer who's actually, I think he's a lieutenant.
Sure.
Wearing
Yeah, there you go.
a Skant uniform. I will also put this in the show notes.
Because men and women are wearing the Skant uniform, and then at a time, watch for it in the future, Picard wears the Skant uniform.
With pants, I think, right? Or leggings, maybe?
I don't think so.
Ooh, it's like a Scottish thing?
Yeah.
Ooh, cool.
I'm a fan of the Skant uniform, especially men in Skant uniforms.
Absolutely.
And Deanna Troi is about to go on a long and fraughtful journey with the uniform, so
She has so many costume changes throughout the series.
hold on to this while you have it.
According to the art of Star Trek, the skirt design for the men's Skant was a logical development, given the total equality of the sexes presumed to exist in the 24th century.
See, I sound like Wikipedia.
That is incredible. Well, speaking of Wikipedia, Jake, can you give us like the Wikipedia version of what it says this episode is? And we'll go from there in case people haven't watched in a billion years.
So Memory Alpha is actually the Wikipedia or the wiki of dominant Star Trek fans. This one is pretty much that Captain Jean-Luc Picard leads the crew of the U.S.S. Enterprise D on its maiden voyage to examine the new planetary system for trade within the Federation. On the way, they...
Sorry, in gay world, examining for trade means something else.
On the way, they encounter Q, an omnipotent extra-dimensional being who challenges humanity as a barbaric, inferior species. Picard and the new crew must hold off Q's challenge and solve the puzzle of Farpoint Station and Dead End 4, a base that is far more than it seems to be. A base that is far more than it seems to be. That sentence is a little more than it needs to be.
You're not wrong. I had a quick question about like the meta of this because I don't remember of the time. Was John Delancey like a big deal before Star Trek?
I think he was a stage actor like Picard or like a...
Who's John Delancey?
John Delancey plays Q.
Oh,
He was like a big deal before he was on Trek, but I didn't really know. And
judging by the amount of makeup he's wearing, he was definitely a big deal. Those lips, too, they were
my God.
well lined.
Amazing. So this goes into one of the points that I had before. We've got the appearance of Q, right? And
He never comes back, right?
so on the budget for this pilot, we've got alien makeup budget, right? And you can only...
And it all goes to Worf.
It all goes to Worf and it all goes to Data.
Can we talk about... But Worf's coloring
Worf looks
on his
amazing.
head... But the coloring on his head does not match the skin coloring of Michael Dorn quite. It looks a little like pancake batter up there. Like, it gets better throughout the series, for sure.
I didn't want to be rude and
gray.
comment on, but I thought it was weird. I thought it was a little...
Yeah. Well, maybe they hadn't dialed in the lighting on him yet. I mean, again, it's the pilot, so they're still finding a lot of the intricacies of the details.
Going off of that too, the Data makeup, the uniforms changed colors for the departments. Do you want to know why? It's to match Data's makeup. That's the reason they changed the uniform colors. Okay, in original series, the security officers were red and the command was yellow. That's why Captain Kirk is in like a gold uniform, right?
Right.
But Jean-Luc Picard is in a red uniform.
Because he looks great in red.
He looks great in red, and Data's makeup didn't match well with the red makeup when they tested it. So
like ketchup and mustard.
yeah, the costume designers were just like, oh, fuck it, let's put him in yellow. And then the Trek people were like, wait, you can't just change the department. And they're like, yes, we can. It's the military. That happens all the time. And they're like, okay.
So red is command, yellow is operations.
Yellow is operations and engineering.
And blue is sciences.
Blue is sciences. Yep.
Got it. Okay.
Huh.
And starting with Next Generation, that is the color scheme now.
And counseling counts as a science.
Yes, exactly.
And so far, the scientists we've met are women.
Yeah.
Three women that are regular cast members in this, which actually it gets knocked down to 2 for much of the show, right? Because Yar leaves later.
Well, yes.
I didn't remember Yar. I
Tasha
remember
Yar?
her face, but I didn't remember her being a person on the bridge.
I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on Tasha mostly because right now I have the same haircut as her, just blue. But she is one of my favorite
It's working.
characters. Thank you. And I wanted to see what your thoughts were as a lady chief of security, because it sort of puts her in that damsel in distress like instantly, but she is strong, but she gets sort of captured or
Oh, I didn't see her as getting captured.
incapacitated.
Look, she's just stupid brute muscle, always thinking with her aggro brain.
And we unlocked some of her backstory of the tough orphan streets.
Oh, right.
There was some acting.
I was gonna say she is delivering. Like Denise Crosby is chewing it up.
She was there to act.
She told the captain, "I am the chief of security, and I can't allow that." He's like, "No shit."
Yeah. So here's one of the things that I love about pilots, and one of the things that on the inside of the industry you can kind of look for. I look for the audition scenes.
Yeah.
So in a pilot you can see like,
it's
God,
my favorite.
Yeah, Tasha Yar's audition scene was that backstory.
During the court scene, you mean?
Yeah, during the court scene.
Yes.
Because normally the audition scene is the best acted scene in the pilot because it's the one that the actor has prepared the most.
Yeah.
When they're being interrogated by Q in that part, and then she comes up with that monologue, it's like suddenly we're doing a Christmas Carol audition, and she's giving that speech about redemption. It's just so heavy all of a sudden.
I blacked it out. Personally, I just was like, I can't right now. This is not the time or place to give me your backstory.
Right.
Come on, Gene Roddenberry.
Well, and Data's dialogue was also probably in the beginning a very good example of what his audition was, which was the
The technobabble in the
what is snooping?
Yeah. That, and then the technobabble in the holodeck with Riker, I think, is the other audition scene.
I think it's a sort of there's the Save the Cat, the book everybody talks about.
Yep.
Like it's sort of the first impression of a character. You kind of have to encapsulate everything that is that struggle. And I don't know how much in the past there had been this sort of lifelike, robotic, humanoid thing that's struggle is trying to be human. Was Data one of the first?
Well, sorry, I keep talking, but
Are you going to compare him to Spock?
Yes, these are the questions. These are great questions.
As did some random ass old man who's on the ship in the second part of the episode.
Oh no! Okay, yes.
Oh, you're like one of those Vulcans, aren't you?
There's a few times in this episode where they really point to what they're trying to do. That is an example. Same at the very end as well.
The thing is, and I found while watching this again, I think this episode does a really great job of setting the trajectory of these characters. We know what everybody's motivations are. We know that there's something going on. The decision to have ex couples, both Deanna Troi and Riker, and something weird with Beverly Crusher and Jean-Luc Picard.
I thought I was a detective because I figured these ones out.
But that wasn't done.
They were only looking at each other for like a minute and a half.
Right. But that wasn't done on TV, or especially in this world where they wanted like the perfect thing. That's where the conflict was coming from, and that was so interesting.
So behind the scenes a little bit, Gene Roddenberry was actually against interpersonal dynamics on the show because he was more interested in the science and the mystery and the utopia. He thought that there'd be so many of these social problems solved that there wouldn't be a lot of interpersonal dynamic issues on board these starships. So that was a struggle for a long time in these, and you will see it a little bit more in the first season when he had a lot of control over the writing. That's kind of absent, kind of not, or they try to incorporate it into the mystery.
One of the biggest complaints from the writers' room was that there was no conflict, and so they had a hard time coming up with plots and things for the characters to do because everything was perfect.
Oh man, I can't wait to see how season 2 changes up. Here's what I wrote about their relationship. Is there going to be a subplot where Picard is actually Wesley's father, but Dr. Crusher never told her dead husband, and they just decided long ago to never tell anyone about their affair? Because damn, those were some hard eyes. So many long, hard swallows.
You can hold on to that theory the whole time. Because it could be true.
Wait, don't tell me it's not proven.
It's not. Who knows?
I literally said no spoilers.
But that's the thing. That's the exciting thing is that you can full on hold on to that theory.
Let's move on to so we've been introduced to a lot of the characters. We still haven't actually even been introduced to the other half of the cast yet. We don't even get to them till like a third of the way through the show.
Right.
But we actually we get a threat. We get Q.
Yes.
He comes on. Or wait, actually the net happens first.
Yeah, the Windows screensaver.
They run from that. And I think that's when they decide to separate the saucer, right? Because they're under threat.
Before all that, there's one more thing I have to mention about the first scene on the bridge, which is day one with Captain Picard. He yells, "Shut off that damn noise!"
Yeah.
To Red Alert.
Immediately loses his temper.
Yeah.
What kind of captain cannot keep his cool for 5 goddamn minutes?
I think they're trying to reflect the fact that this is a new ship for him, and he's not sure exactly what's going on. Is this the only Galaxy class ship at this point?
Yes, it's brand new. This is the new Enterprise too, so it's got a legacy that it's built up around it.
Yeah, to be clear, the first Enterprise from the series was called just U.S.S. 1701, right?
1701.
Yeah, so then each one thereafter had a letter designation, and this is D, so this is the 5th iteration of the ship.
So there's a lot of pressure.
My eyes glazed over.
It's all good. It's all good. But yeah, I wrote down that we get introduced to Captain Asshole Picard, and then later on we get Commander Stickler Asshole Riker.
Yeah,
and
they're
then,
both so military.
and they warm each other up. And that's the thing that I really loved about this.
I can't wait till Riker's warmed up enough to saddle up on a chair backwards.
Oh, God, the Riker maneuver.
The Riker maneuver?
So there's the Picard maneuver and the Riker maneuver. Both of these are actual maneuvers in the world of Star Trek, but in the fandom, it's Patrick Stewart pulling down his shirt, like, hup, that's the Picard maneuver, and the Riker maneuver is swinging a chair backwards and swinging your leg over it because he had spine problems, so he couldn't sit down and stand up.
Oh, is that why?
Yeah.
I thought it was just because Frakes is just so tall.
Well,
he could.
Yeah.
He would sometimes walk up and step over the back of the chair.
Yes.
It was the easiest way for him to get in and out of chairs, is what he says.
That's nonsense. That doesn't make any sense. Why would the chair need to be backwards? You could just sit wide-legged upon it.
It's called manspreading.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I love that. And it was something that I remembered from the compilation videos on YouTube.
Yes. Also, we get the introduction of beardless Riker, which is, it's so unsettling.
Oh, yeah, he's a baby.
Don't spoil it for her. She doesn't know about the beard yet.
She knows.
So let's talk about plot. So the screensaver occurs. They figure they need to run from it, and Q shows up on the ship. He shows up as like a 16th century European guy. And is it my imagination, or did he have a little bit of like tone makeup, like bronzer on him?
So,
right?
well, here's the thing: is that they were still filming it with the same techniques that they were using from the '60s, because Gene Roddenberry was like, "I know how to do this." And so, if you look at the original series, like the men have full on like blue eyeshadow because it would make their eyes pop.
Yeah.
So
Spock
there's
especially.
a lot of these techniques that sort of change. They're like, Q is an alien, so let's just change it a little bit, but use the costumes that we have in storage. So the whole thing with Q changing the outfits was totally a jab at the original series. Not a jab, an homage, like a format of the original series.
Was changing his outfit a bunch of times?
Because it was showing these different outfits. That's how they made him omnipotent, right? And it's the same thing that they would do in the original series.
It was a cheap way to do it.
A cheap way to do it. And when they go to the court, it's a whole bunch of people, like humans, in costume, because they didn't have an alien budget. They spent it all on Data and Worf.
Oh, right.
It's a pilot. Yeah, they didn't have anything.
Budget is the reason for that. Okay.
Yeah.
I just thought when I saw us go to this mystical magical courtroom on another plane of existence that was full of peasants in medieval garb, Renaissance?
Actually, the future. It's humans in the future, like the post-apocalyptic.
Well, our future, right?
Yeah.
It's the 21st century. Data actually says, historically intriguing, Captain.
Yeah.
Which is a weird line.
Historically.
And actually, Picard calls it the post-atomic horror.
Exactly.
So in Star Trek lore, there was a bad... Yeah, horror.
Not post-atomic horror.
There was nuclear wars, right? That pretty much leveled most of Earth.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So we took to the stars.
And that's what those costumes were with the drug-sniffing snowsuits.
That was the 90s.
Oh, that was awesome.
Yeah.
So this is the late 80s. So this is the DARE era of like drugs are the worst thing that could ever happen to anyone.
Yeah.
So the future of humanities, we're all relying on these drugs for sure.
So that was so interesting. He's changing it. He changes into a sexy like 1940s uniformed
Did you think it's
officer.
sexy because it's a military uniform?
No. The like Green Beret guy. outfit.
Yeah.
And then, that was sexy.
We're still not thinking that's sexy, but yeah.
I mean, I think it's sexy. Don't lump me in with you.
Sexy AF. And then he goes into like a snowsuit where he's sniffing cocaine.
Yeah. It's from the Illuminati. Did you see that?
Oh, yeah, there is an Illuminati symbol up there, kind of.
I thought that was really interesting to say that, you're so noble as the human race, and yet you have this military force, which is completely drugged all the time, like a very Brave New World, Aldous Huxley kind of like opiate of the masses.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
But I didn't remember Star Trek having a military, like early.
Oh, that's because Starfleet is the military.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing that we'll actually explore a lot more throughout the series is what Starfleet's role is, whether they are scientists or adventurers and explorers or military.
Because
and
it's
they
an
are all
era
those
of
things.
peace, which the other one was exploration. So it was like, we're on the new frontier, what's out there. But now we're kind of discovered it all. Now it's how do we let all of this work together?
Yeah, it's diplomacy and bringing it all in.
Yeah. In the middle of my notes, it says broccoli potato soup is delicious.
Oh.
Unrelated to the show at all. I just really liked the potato soup I was eating as I watched it.
This episode is actually sponsored by broccoli potato soup.
Here's an interesting factoid that I didn't catch the few times that I've watched it. I guess we killed all the lawyers on Earth.
Oh, because no one's yeah, well.
No. He flat out says, like Shakespeare once said, kill all the lawyers. And then Q's like, and you did. And I was like, we did?
Yes. The post-atomic wars, no lawyers survived that.
Also, this
That's
is
bizarre.
I guess. I don't know how true that is. So we have the introduction of data pads, which you saw for the first time. Because this is the late 80s, people don't know how tablets work yet. So data pads in Star Trek are treated like books or pieces of paper, where they're like, here's this document you want, and they'll hand the whole pad over. And you're like, why don't you just send the file?
Yeah.
They didn't have a concept of it. They're just like, it's like digital paper.
That'd
Here
be
you go.
impossible for everyone to have their
I know.
own super complex device in their hand. That'd be way
The whole
too
series, you'll watch it like, this is how we got touchscreens, but they didn't know how it was going to work quite yet.
But that is what inspired the developers at Apple, probably.
No, 100% it is.
Very
It's
cool.
like almost guaranteed.
Wow. I'm glad they could think outside of the sheet of paper, as it were.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the saucer separation,
Yes.
which happens in episode 1. There's two big things that happen in episode 1
That never happen
feel
again.
like massive parts of Star Trek that like you when you're introducing a series you wouldn't quite do, which is you separate the ship into two pieces for almost no reason, and then also you have an omnipotent opponent, which seems crazy hard as your first villain, and a villain that comes in and just criticizes your entire existence.
If you don't mind, I can explain both of those.
Please do.
So the first one is the saucer separation, right? This is a pilot. They're looking to impress whoever is watching this with whatever they can get. And at this moment in time, computer graphics are the newest thing and the newest way that they can show the spaceships without having to build actual physical models. I think they did do some
build I mean, these are models.
These are models, but they can enhance it with these computer graphics now, which they couldn't before.
Right.
So they can make these models and things look even better and even more like space with lasers and effects and pew.
The shots of the Enterprise look great. The opening shot is awesome.
The money has been spent there.
Yeah.
And so they want to show what the potential is for the visuals of this show, right? The same thing with the makeup and the costumes and the da-da-da-da.
And the big finale.
And the big finale. With having an omnipotent enemy, it wasn't the omnipotence, it was the teleportation. At that time, when you're working with a budget, you want a way to get to point A to point B and have them be as different as possible. And the easiest way to do that is beaming or teleporting. There's no reason for Picard to be beaming all over to these different locations or using the holodeck. But if they're being threatened by this force that can teleport them to a courtroom in the middle of nowhere or a field or wherever he needs them to be, they can use any set that they want and show the diverse range of things they can do. This is not just on the starship with people talking. We can have full sets and full adventures that are out there.
Yeah, I do want to show the dynamics of that.
Yeah. Did the original have holodecks that were that complex?
You mean the original series?
Oh,
original
no.
series.
No, this is
Holodeck
new.
is next generation
Yeah.
technology, and it is the fucking best.
Yeah, because that's another interesting example of showing we can be anywhere.
Yes, it
Yeah.
was the best decision they could ever make.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it seems like Riker doesn't even know about holodecks.
It's new.
Yeah, so
new
it's
technology
the first time. Okay.
You're introducing it to the audience like as a concept, and it becomes a staple for the future because the holodeck can go wrong. You can get holodeck characters. You can be Sherlock Holmes. You can be anyone you want. That's how we get Fistful of Datas. It's a holodeck episode. Now it makes sense.
Spoilers.
Well,
wait,
it's
is?
a format of an episode. You come to learn that holodeck episodes kind of are self-contained little adventures with the characters playing someone else.
They were like, we want to jump genres to
It's
a
the
noir
best.
story.
Yeah, or a Western.
And you get to learn more about the interests and hobbies of the characters.
So the saucer separation was still not important at all.
Not at all. Not important.
So much time spent. Okay. Separate. He has to say the word before it can initiate its separation
So
sequence.
part of this also is that they needed to fill time. There was a
Yes.
big argument in the executives about this actually being
Yep.
a 2-hour pilot. And Roddenberry only wanted 1. And
Yep.
so they compromised at 90 minutes. And so there was like, what are we filling? And if you notice, when you watch both the saucer separation and its realignment or whatever you call it, there's a whole lot of like tense staring at the view screen. And there's even a repeated shot of Troy in there, I think, where she just looks kind of bored, honestly.
And some of the reverses are not from that bridge or that scene or that time or that lighting.
Oh, really?
No, you can tell you can tell the lighting's a little bit different. Yeah, I mean, we all see through this because we're also specifically looking for this.
Yeah,
I love the lighting on the underside of the consoles next to Troy and Riker.
Yeah.
At the
Also, the chairs don't have bottoms, which
Right.
I've never noticed before.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Right?
It's like a lawn chair.
Oh, yeah, they're very
It's
reclined.
like floating.
It's such a 90s deck, right? Because of the carpet, for
Oh my
one
God.
thing.
I wrote, it looks like a 1990s like Saturn interior of a car.
Wait, describe the carpet to me.
So there's like a light, what is it, like a pinkish salmon almost carpet?
Salmon sand colored.
On the bridge of the Enterprise. In fact, the whole Enterprise mostly is carpet. I think engineering even has carpet.
If you picture like a 90s car, like a Buick, and the carpet on the floor of that, that's what it all is.
Got it.
There's a lot of wood paneling as well, which is also super
Yeah.
90s.
Like light leather.
Speaking of the Enterprise design, not only do they have a lovely bridge, they have a smaller bridge known as the Battle Bridge. The thing that I wanted to mention that plot-wise, it does make a lot of sense to separate the ship, and it was used again in the new Star Wars films, the second of the
Star
three
Trek?
new ones. No,
Oh,
Star Wars.
You-
Yeah.
I see what you mean.
when it's like, okay, send off the pods and we're going to
Gotcha,
trick
gotcha.
them by misdirection.
Right.
It's all about the misdirection, which they really weren't explling. They
No.
never said why they separated the ship into, supposedly the population of innocent people and
Yes.
then these 4 officers, but it was a huge amount of the ship to only have 4 people in it. Like somebody had to bunk up with their friend because their apartment is the bottom part.
No, I get it.
And actually, Chief O'Brien, who's not introduced,
I forgot O'Brien was even
yeah,
there.
So the curly-haired guy at the
Yeah.
con.
He's cute.
Yeah, he's actually a pretty important character. Well,
and I didn't know he was
not
in that
important.
episode. Not important.
Not important.
Shut
He's
up.
a pretty ancillary character to the show.
No, but that was to show the capabilities of this new version of the Enterprise. It was to show what it can do, the holodeck, the separation,
And that's
the
presumably a redress of an old set. Like, is that like
yeah. Well, and also Roddenberry was adamant of this ship has families. It was a plot point for Picard. I don't get along with kids. Make sure I'm not an ass in front of children. Whatever. And so he had to have a failsafe that he's showing the audience. Yes, there are families. Yes, there are children, but they're going to be okay to go out on adventures.
Yeah.
We've got this failsafe switch that we can check.
We got the party bus that can disconnect.
They can disconnect so we can go off and explore and have these adventures, and you don't have to worry about these kids dying.
And part of this utopia is you can bring your kids to work.
Exactly. That's the draw.
The children will not be the red shirts, an original series term.
Which are now the gold shirts. Because, so the red shirts were security, so they would always beam down to the planet, and they would be the extras that would get shot off because they were security. Now, security is gold. And so gold shirt never caught on like red shirt did, but it's what it is.
So Farpoint Station, Riker's there. We meet him.
Yeah.
This beardless
young Riker.
stunning gentleman.
Asshole stickler Riker.
He asks for an apple and then mysteriously gets it. Right?
Apple. What a strange fruit.
We meet Beverly Crusher and her son.
Local babe, Beverly Crusher with local
yeah,
babe, Wesley
the reddest
Crusher.
of her red hair.
Those bangs, though.
One of Wesley's first lines is I consider one of the rudest lines ever, which is, if you're wondering about my mom, Commander Riker, it's not that she's unfriendly. She's just shy around men she doesn't know. And she's like, Wesley, shut the fuck up.
I know.
I don't know. It seems like an appropriate thing to say. She was a little cold towards Riker.
She was cold. And
businesslike.
and what is why is her demeanor so?
Because she's a hot babe. She's got to shut it down.
It's true. But also, I think they're really establishing that Starfleet is a military institution, and at the get-go. And then once you warm up to people, once you become a crew, now you can let that down and sort of breathe a little bit.
Speaking of military and chain of command,
Yeah.
I was a little upset by the way we shortly thereafter also meet Geordi.
Yeah.
And he comes up to Riker, and
Yes.
Riker's like, excuse me, address me by
Stickler
first
asshole.
officer. And it was like, what the fuck? You didn't do that to Beverly Crusher a moment ago. This seems really...
Do you know why? Because Beverly Crusher outranks him.
What?
Chief Medical Officer is the senior ranking officer on the ship,
What?
even above the captain.
No.
Because the Chief Medical Officer is the only person that can tell the captain that they're unfit for duty.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, snap. Wish we had that in the United States government.
But Riker can relieve him?
Riker could relieve him.
This is so interesting.
Chain of command fluctuates based on the situation.
Oh, Xander, you're blowing my mind.
I know.
That is bonkers.
Right?
So yeah, we meet Geordi, played by LeVar Burton.
Yes.
Who gets third billing, by the way,
Was
in the
Reading
credits.
Rainbow-
Reading Rainbow was not only out. Roots had been like 10 years before.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I actually didn't know Reading Rainbow started in '83. So that's kind of where he was also doing
found
a
the
lot of
sweet
stuff.
spot on
It's
TV.
interesting because that's a hosting gig,
Yeah.
not an acting
Yeah.
gig. So to
have both of those
I mean,
airing.
Most people who can do one well really suck at the other, right, Xander?
I'm not getting under the shade tree.
JK. Just being self-deprecating over here.
Riker goes on board. He meets the icy version of Picard, who's like just stern as hell. They're both very militaristic.
Hey, he didn't pass the test yet.
Picard's dealing with some shit. Too,
Yeah, no
with
kidding.
Q.
I love Riker's briefing of that, which
Yeah.
is
Here, watch this recap.
watch the scene we just shot a few minutes ago.
With really impressive security camera angles.
But this is for the audience. This is because they were worried that the plot was too complicated or things were happening too fast.
Yeah.
Because they were used to the 1960s audience who had this slow burn plot. They were moving too quickly for them.
Well, they are kind of mashing two plots together. It's not quite an A plot and a B plot. It's two different plots that they mush in.
Right. So this is the recap that's more for the audience than anything. Because an hour and a half is a long thing.
I did like Riker's line of, he finishes the briefing and turns away. He's like, he calls that a little adventure.
So that is where we see Riker first forming respect for Captain Picard. Of like, oh, that's why he was like this. Because
that's
this
Big Daddy
situation's
Picard.
Big Daddy Picard.
I feel like we kind of skimmed over the meat of the first part of the episode. It does feel like a part 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And the whole courtroom scene with Q
Yes.
feels over the top to me.
Does it?
Oh, you mean the spotlight with him being like lifted up and that makeup?
I wrote, hold on, I have some very good notes for that. The remote control chair of my dreams. And this outfit that Q is wearing is the Q outfit. It becomes like the symbolic Q outfit.
Oh, I called it a Queen of Hearts look.
Hell yeah.
That's
totally true.
It had like wooden eagles on it.
Yeah. And it was like whatever they could get. They just glued it to like a remote control chair. And
I
just,
saw a little nugget when it was leaving his special chair.
Yeah.
It was going backwards, and you could see it had giant robotic legs that they had just not lit and covered in black fabric, and it was in a black hallway. And if you look closely, you can see, but I guess the contrast was up high enough on most televisions. When you watch it in high def, you see that, but before
Nope.
you did not.
Yeah, high def television, like it
changes a lot.
you can see the makeup so much more, and they still did a very good job.
really did.
I'm not slamming the talent of that. Like, it's amazing, but like what they could see on the viewers then versus now is much different.
A few other things about this scene that I love, just the rabble-rousing crowd.
Yeah.
The bailiff that basically just rings a cowbell over and over. He's a little
Yeah.
person.
It's a little exploitative.
It is indeed.
It's not a cowbell. It's a gong. It's or no,
Tiny
no.
gong.
But
it's a cowbell.
It's a cowbell with like a rope situation,
Who
though,
knows?
right? That's so
It's
strange.
like a knockoff prop from whatever like kung fu knockoff racist thing they were working on at the time.
Absolutely. and then right before, the commercial break, it really digs deep with Picard.
Yeah.
explaining that he will represent all of humanity and you can now test us.
Acting.
Yeah, the acting chops come out.
Yeah, they needed to have that grandiose nature, that Shakespearean kind of moment, that weight, right?
Apparently on set, he was a nightmare the first couple of episodes.
Really?
Because he was taking it so seriously, like method acting on set, like it was a stage show, and the rest of them were like LA whatever actors, not Marina Sirtis, but the casual nature of a show. So they all kind of gelled, and he was on the outside, and I heard the set would get like icy cold. Later on, he cracks and like jokes around with them and like gets in with it, and you can kind of see it in the performance. But in this, you can definitely tell like Denise Crosby and Patrick Stewart, Tasha Yar and Picard are there to act.
They are. Yeah, it feels like they are auditioning constantly in
Yes.
this episode. I agree.
And prove that this is not some dumb sci-fi show. This is acting and real art.
So let's fast forward a little bit to like where we meet McCoy. So like this guy, this guy is not identified as McCoy.
No.
Who's McCoy?
This admiral,
The old guy.
old admiral.
Oh, yeah.
That we get a very brief scene with. This was just intended to be a cameo just because, right?
Yeah, and it's really special because DeForest Kelley, who plays Bones, he's the doctor from the original series. That's who that old man is. He didn't really get to be a part of the reboots or things like that later on. He didn't live to make other cameos. He was older for the cast of Star Trek, the original series anyway. And so this is kind of really special, and you got to see that curmudgeonly old doctor that doesn't have a place on this starship anymore.
Right. And now he actually is still playing the same character, though they don't refer to him, right?
I think so. I think that's the idea, because they even say like he's 170 something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the implication. But I don't know if they had the rights to those characters at the time, so they couldn't directly reference.
Oh.
I don't know.
Oh, interesting.
But they were trying not to be heavy-handed and over-explain things, too. So that may have been their way of
Pretty
doing
key.
that.
They wanted to move on from the show, from the old series, but still like give the motifs. Like that's when he points out Data is kind of like a Vulcan,
so,
right?
on these starships, and you'll find this as you watch every Star Trek, there is someone learning to be human. There is Spock learning to be human. There's Data learning to be human. Later on, you'll meet like T'Pol.
Seven of Nine.
7 of 9 is a good example, or the EMH from Voyager. Like
That's from Star Trek Voyager.
Exactly. There are always characters that are an outside perspective because they lend us the window for us to look at ourselves. And why do we do the things that we do?
Love that.
That's what Star Trek's about.
Data doesn't really get there this episode yet.
Nope.
He definitely does it through the series, but
Brent
it's like
Spiner is an amazing actor.
yes, he really is.
And fun fact, Bonnie's aunt like lived next to him when he was in this time period.
Yeah.
And would like feed him because he was a poor struggling actor. So they have a connection with Brent Spiner.
That's awesome. I thought that he was one of the few out of the gate that my recollection of what that character becomes was not vastly different. And
Not vastly different, but different enough because there's so much subtlety.
Yeah, and he had specific character choices that I don't think. I think some of them were a little over the top or underwhelming in the case of Worf. I think like he later develops this viewpoint of all Klingons have a warlike mentality
Yes.
of every situation, and that's the point of view, which he kind of did in this hallway scene with Q, and then he didn't later on. He's like, Captain, what's this over here?
Yeah.
But Data's viewpoint was clear throughout, I thought.
And this, remember, this is like kind of the first time that we're seeing the concept of an android too. So he's got to lay out all of these things. You got to remember like where computers were at that time. Like it was unfathomable that there could be a computer that could talk back to you, much less coherent thoughts, you know? So they had to
Don't
establish...
tell Alexa, she'll be upset.
Exactly, yeah. Siri's always listening anyway, so whatever. They had to establish, no, this is a computer, and this is how someone would play a robot at that time. It's to rattle off things as if you gave a chain of command or a command block or something.
They must have given them a little direction to like be a little bit human, because he definitely gives like some smug responses. Definitely during
That's Brent Spiner though, acting through it.
Yeah, when he gets up after like having been knocked down and says all systems operating.
And
He's like definitely giving a wink to Riker on that
Exactly, yeah. And I think that's what makes it so charming.
He took so long to process that when they both are like hit and knocked down. Riker and Data, they're on the planet towards the end,
right.
And
Riker woke first.
Hey, he asks if Riker is okay, but in a Data-like way, and he's like, "Yeah, man, what about you?" And he takes like 10 full seconds,
Right.
to figure out his systems are still operating.
Full diagnostic.
Because full diagnostic, yeah.
DOS computer right there.
That's the same thing of like, that's the actor who doesn't know the parameters of this new technology. How long does it take me to run a diagnostic? I don't know at this time. Later on, you kind of figure it out. Oh, those things I can kind of breeze through. But we need to establish that those happen.
Something that doesn't get breezed through is the first look between Deanna Troi and Commander Riker.
Imzadi.
Holy moly. Will you tell us what it is, Zadi?
Imzadi, yeah.
We tell that is?
So in Next Gen, we get introduced to the concept of a betazoid, which is a new alien, which Deanna Troi is. So we have these empathic...
Wait.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. She's called a betazoid.
Yes.
Okay.
She's
Go
from
on.
Beta Z, which is a little confusing.
She's from Beta Z. She's half betazoid because she's half human as well, which is
there's
reminiscent to
some
Spock.
Betazoid shame thrown from
Zorn or something?
Zorn.
Yeah. So some quick backstory about that too. Marina Sirtis is the actress who plays Deanna Troi. She has an English accent, right? A British English accent. On the set, they told her to come up with a Betazoid accent, and she's like,
that's what that is?
Yeah. She's like, what does that mean? I thought she was like a Greek actress because the accent
that's her name
sounds
is
very
Greek, too,
Greek. Yeah, and she looks at the part. That's a made-up accent. Then, because I'm sorry to get so into this.
No.
Put a pin in that, okay? Gene Roddenberry, creator of Star Trek, right, wrote his wife into the pilot of the original, Majel Barrett. She's the number one. She's the second in command in the pilot of the first episode of Star Trek. They didn't want a woman in command. They didn't want her because she was his wife, or they were dating at the time or whatever. She goes out. She dyes her hair blonde with bleach, gets cast again as Nurse Chapel, and under the radar, because women are so dispensable and interchangeable, becomes part of Star Trek and now fast forward to Next Generation, Majel Barrett is the voice of the computer. It's Gene Roddenberry's wife. She's always been this voice of the computer. She still continues to be to this day.
She will also play a somewhat comical role throughout this series
as Deanna Troi's mother. So when she comes in that role, Majel Barrett can't do the Betazoid accent. So Marina Sirtis is like, why doesn't my Betazoid mother have this accent? And they're like, oh, well, maybe she gets it from her father. Then an actor comes in to play her father. He doesn't have the accent either. So Marina Sirtis, this is at that
Why
panel.
can't she just work with them to teach her unique accent she makes?
Because she was so far down on the totem pole as talent, like no one was listening to her or listening to her decisions. So she was like, now I'm the only one that's doing this weird accent that is not Betazoid. It comes from nowhere, and I'm stuck with it.
What is the accent she chose? I mean,
think
how
it's
would
like
you...
Greek, English-ish?
It just sounds sort of British,
I don't have
but
those feelings,
it's
Captain.
more...
Marina Sirtis did say about this episode that it was difficult to watch the pilot with my hands over my eyes. I didn't feel like it was working very well.
Yeah.
She's particularly embarrassed about her own
If
performance.
you can
No,
look
she's
up,
incredible.
She's incredible.
She's
It's
not
such
written
a-
very well, unfortunately. She's
Yes.
written
Yeah.
to be super emotional. She's
Yeah.
directed to just like look worried for 90% of the episode.
Right.
Oh my God.
She finally smiles at the end when she says joy and gratitude twice in a row.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
it's not enough to give her, unfortunately.
It's almost like a Christmas Carol or
we're gonna
something.
we're gonna
But
see her come alive a lot more later
I want
on.
to
Yes.
talk more about this position in general, because to me,
Of the counselor?
what a Betazoid's power is
Oh, God.
seems absolutely nonsense.
The range fluctuates. It doesn't make any sense.
So a Betazoid is someone who can intuit emotions, or maybe this is a half Betazoid's power.
Nope, Betazoids.
And it seems absolutely useless. You can't read minds. You can't. It's like, oh, wow, I'm sensing you are angry at me because you are yelling. What? Why is this helpful at all?
Oh my
I
God.
mean, it played a really big role in this episode because we're getting closer and closer to finding out that there's these little hints. I won't say anything that spoils until we get there, but there are these little
you can
hints
talk
that
about it.
there
We
is.
watched it, yeah.
Well, I want to save it for the end of the episode because it's such a surprise, and I had completely forgotten. But there is this hint, Zorn or whatever, the weird, creepy guy that's really
monster of the week.
overacting with the long blonde hair guy.
Yeah. That's how they do another Alien. It's just old guy with long hair. Woo, weird.
Yeah, super weird. And he's talking to something that's not there, and Deanna Troi senses something bigger. No, it's bigger. It's not in this room, but it's on this planet, but it's big and it feels.
Yeah.
So I guess it's kind of like with this power, you can sense how many people are in a room.
It's kind of vague. Like
Yeah.
they
never
keep
define
it vague, and that's kind of a gift the writers did, which is like, let's not define this too much so we can do anything.
They can do whatever they want.
And that's what they do with technobabble in general. When we're talking about a lot of science solutions throughout Star Trek, keep an eye out for like, if we just put these words together and say, let's change the frequency or vary the frequency, this solves our problem.
Absolutely.
Well, it's an interesting part of the writing is like, these mysteries, just as you pointed out, Becca, is like, oh, she can sense something big. That's a hint as to what the station really is, right? But we wouldn't know that. We don't know that until the very end.
Here's the fun thing about Star Trek. The technobabble makes sense. It's nonsense words.
There's consistency.
But there's consistency and there's concepts behind them.
Yes.
So if you do break it down and you start paying attention, I can tell you what a level 4 diagnostic is.
I've started to solve some problems from engineering.
What's a level 4 diagnostic?
It's the level of how long it'll take to go thoroughly through the systems and tell you what is wrong with it. But it's something they could throw out, as technobabble. I am part of a Star Trek RPG show called Clear Skies on Q Times every Monday night, and I play the chief engineer, and I have a technobabble table. So I have them broken down into categories, so I can say...
Did you make this?
Yeah, but there are 3 columns, so I can say, I just need to fluctuate the nano emitters. And I can just boop, 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 and make up a problem, but there's some general sense of, I kind of understand what you have to do.
Yeah.
Can I shepherd us along to some scenes I want to talk about?
Please do. No, we need it.
Okay, so there was the heart-to-heart between Captain Picard and Riker where they have some tea together. So Picard presents Riker with a puzzle. He says, I heard with your last commander, you refused to beam him down because you were worried about your captain's health. Would you ever defy my order in such a way? Play Riker.
Oh, absolutely.
What? Excuse me? I'm your commanding officer. Respect authority.
Well, you'll find that if you open the manual, that is actually protocol, that it is the first officer's duty to tell the captain when they are making a mistake, and you need to stay on the starship for the safety of the entire crew, and I will beam down on the away team.
Well done. I accept you.
Also protect me from children.
Yeah, protect me from children.
I like this aspect of this a lot because Kirk was always going down a lot to
he shouldn't
the
have
surface on the original series, and he is kind of important. Yeah. So like it makes a lot of logical sense, and also makes someone like Riker be the adventurous one and go around and do all the combat scenes, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting because I saw this. I was like, okay, it's about the heart to heart, but really they were setting up the precedent. This is not going to be a Kirk kind of captain.
Exactly.
Get used to it. Don't think it's weird. That's why Riker's here.
Until it does become that, because they want him down. They want Patrick Stewart acting.
Yeah, there are some episodes where he definitely takes the lead on things, but for the most part, they're very good. Again, you point out how consistent they are with their technobabble. They are consistent in following those rules too.
Once they found out that people were watching, they created the Bibles and really stuck to it.
Yes.
Because they're like, oh, this is why the uniforms change color. It's not because of a makeup thing. It's because they wanted to reinvent the uniforms. Or, they really create reasons for everything.
I need to read this Bible so I can memorize tidbits.
Yeah, you'll get to it. Like it'll come to you as you watch through because they'll explain it to you.
I would like to do a whole bonus episode just on the Bible, actually, which I have. I have a copy of.
And then I also wanted to mention a scene in the med bay with Geordi and Dr. Crusher where we find out that his visor that allows him to see all types of anything, which is very, very useful, is also absolute excruciating pain at all points in time.
That's such an interesting fact I don't remember.
Yeah.
But do they kill the nerves so he's not just like constantly in pain, or what's the deal?
He doesn't do anything at the moment. He says, I know there's nothing you can do. I've heard this a lot of, and this is again speaking to the era of, there was a lot of like literature that was going out, especially for schools, of incorporating disability into, and I think they were calling it handicap people at the time, into society and into these stories for more representation. It was really at the forefront of people's minds. And these stories weren't getting told. And so the conversation, just the dialogue of Geordi saying, I've heard this a bunch of times. It's him getting out the exposition in a way that's not an after-school special of like, I'm blind, but I can do everything just as well as everyone else. But then
Which would
there's
be condescending, right?
Condescending, but there's also this start you can kind of see of disability as a superpower, which is another trope that you don't want to fall into. But for the time, it was revolutionary, and it was a new way to look at introducing a character that had something that made them that interesting.
And as I recall, they don't make his blindness a huge point of many of the episodes. His utility comes as his engineering skill, which is really great.
Because the temptation from like the old background would be to like a Velma style, where we knock his visor off, he can't see. Let's see what we can do there. And they never really kind of do that. They play with the concept of what if, but I think they really treat it well. But that's coming from my able person perspective too.
I felt like diversity, despite having mostly white people in the lead parts of the cast, because like Geordi and Worf aren't very prominent in this episode.
No.
Now, we do have exactly. We do have 3 women who are pretty prominent.
I believe this episode passes the Bechdel test, and a lot of Next Generation does. A surprising amount of Next Generation passes the Bechdel test.
We did not have
two women
talking
about
and did not mention a male character.
Was there something with either with Yar or Troy or Crusher?
I feel like Crusher and Troy didn't even meet. And Yar and Troy maybe
setting
not the
up
pilot.
Potential for those things to happen, and strong female characters in good positions. Bechdel test doesn't necessarily point to the gender representation.
But I did see a lot of diversity within a lot of the crew of the Enterprise, which was nice. A lot of the people that came on at different points were from a lot of different backgrounds, which was nice to see.
Yeah, and something that we didn't really get to see in the original series, because it was all very militaristic. We're transferring the Navy to starships, you know what I mean? One thing I did want to say about that, though, too, was with there was something that recently came out that someone watched all of Star Trek and rated each of the series based on the Bechdel test and whether they passed or not, or the percentage of episodes that passed. And Voyager was huge because of Janeway.
Obviously. Yeah.
But Next Gen was like 75 or 80%, which
Whoa.
is unheard of today.
Really?
I would definitely look up those figures. There was an article that came out,
All right. Well, and moving along to another scene that I want to hear, whatever magical tidbits that I know I'm going to learn, is Deanna Troi and Riker obviously have hooked up before.
Have they?
Well, definitely. They have a history, which they're trying to not mention in front of anyone else.
Yes.
But really it comes out when they're on the planet, on the base, and they're being shot at or whatever from something in space that looks like a very, very large ship. And then he's going out, and as her commanding officer, Riker says, "You 3 go back to the ship," and she says, "No, but wait, William,
if you should be hurt," was the line she had to say.
If you should be hurt.
And then he just like shuts her down and gives her back, and she's like, "Sorry, sir."
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is that they're establishing this dynamic, like how do X's work together in a military sort of environment with the chain of command.
She straight up talked in his brain, which, by the way, so they have telepathy?
Well, I don't want to get too much into it because they will explain some things later, but they left it intentionally vague right now with the Imzadi. That's where we were going with this.
maybe you need to bone before you can be telepathically connected."
Maybe.
Because she didn't do it to anyone else.
Right. So the Imzadi, as you can kind of infer, is this special connection between two people, and it might be involved with Betazoid mating, maybe, or at least the dating ritual part of it.
Yeah, I got that.
Yeah.
I mean, I have that.
Right. You've got one.
Yeah.
And so where you were saying the Betazoid Deanna Troi could feel emotions and things like that, full Betazoids do have telepathy and can communicate that way.
Oh, that's an actual skill.
That's an
I
actual
give that
skill.
credit. Yeah.
Deanna Troi, though, can do that with her Imzadi because the connection is so strong. She's able to.
Do you only get one Imzadi at a time?
Well, I guess that depends on
it's like a BFF necklace.
Because they do explore the aspects of like polyamorous relationships and things like that. Betazoid weddings are notorious for everybody attending naked. That's just part of it.
I want to go to
That'll come up in a future episode.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember that episode because you
Bolians
get to see some outline of Deanna Troi looking like Eve in
like
the,
a snack.
about to take a bite of an
You
apple.
remember.
surprisingly progressive again for the time, because this was again sort of at the height, not the height, but there was still like the AIDS crisis was still a thing, and drugs and drug use was leading to further AIDS cases, and so there was a lot of sexual stigma that was still out there, unprotected sex and STIs and things like that. So to have a show on prime time that could be a kids show talking about these issues is really something special.
Let's talk about Crusher Picard.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah,
really
and
interesting.
I cry still. It's the losing a dad thing and like losing somebody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And having people connect over someone that we've mutually lost.
So it seemed like Picard didn't even remember Wesley's existence for a second.
And I love that.
Because he doesn't really see kids. He's like, oh, yeah, you had a kid. I didn't even think of that.
But the thing is, I'm friends with people that would happen. If they showed up on my front door, I'd be like, oh, yeah, you've got a kid. That's a person now.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot.
I do like the dynamic of like this guy's got to run ships that are full of families and he does not know handle children.
They had to give him a flaw.
That was a great
He was
one.
too perfect, and it's a great one.
Yeah.
Because if they made him grumpy, he wouldn't be likable. But if he's grumpy towards kids, that's a funny thing they can play.
Yeah. This scene specifically. So Wesley negotiates with his mom that he'll get to ride up to the elevator, which is called a
Turbo lift.
and but not step out of it.
Right.
And then
Which is a
Crusher's
great
like,
plan.
Yeah. And then Crusher's like, oh, wow. Remember, Picard? We have a backstory. Don't let children onto my bridge. Actually, he's
my
not
son.
on the bridge. He's still in the turbo
I'm not
lift.
touching your bridge. I'm not touching your bridge.
I'm not
Exactly. There's a
touching-
wall.
And then he miraculously, we see growth already,
Yeah.
gives permission for Wesley to walk around the bridge. And then they go to handycam camera work
Yeah.
where it's really shaky. And
Yep.
it's like, is this a toddler's POV?
Oh my God, the
So
Dutch
funny.
angle POV shots.
Yeah,
so
right.
good.
That's the same in the engineering room
Yeah,
when
in the
they
opening.
first did that.
Yep.
It was
It's
really
weird.
wobbly. Yeah.
It's a very sign of the times and did not leave a lasting impression.
They didn't have a steady cam
No.
rig at that time. No.
I believe that scene that you were talking about is also the Picard and the Wesley Crusher audition scene. Because
Oh.
Wesley
Yeah.
has to do technobabble
That's
at
a
the
good
thing.
guess.
Yep.
And Picard has to be like, I hate kids. Oh, your dad died. Oh, I knew him. Oh, I'm soft now. So I think those are good audition scenes.
Yeah, and then as it continues, the technobabble,
Yeah.
we see a lot of potential from Wesley of what he wants to
Smart
do and what he
kid.
could do.
He could
really
contribute.
absorbs.
So you could be a kid that's watching that. You could be on the Starship Bridge too.
Yes. But he wasn't. What was it about it for you? Like I think as a kid, for me, I didn't. He felt.
I didn't want to be the kid. I wanted to be the adult.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think he
I don't
felt
wa- I
patronized
never-
already.
Yeah, and I didn't want to be patronized too as an audience.
Yeah. Same. And also his uniform in this is fine. It's kind of just boring. But I remember he gets the striped uniform
He does.
soon, which has like kind of a rainbow motif to it.
Yeah, he joins like
Don't
sort of.
tell me
Well,
this.
It's okay.
This isn't spoiling
It's not
anything.
really spoiling. He joins sort of like the Academy track, and so it's not a rainbow. It's the 3 department colors because he could be either any
Oh,
one.
you're gonna choose your path.
Yeah, it's kind of
Wesley.
cute, but it does feel like a kid's outfit.
It
for
does,
sure.
especially for that time. It's very Oshkosh Bagosh.
Yes, yeah, onesie.
Yeah.
Less the uniform.
And I love it.
All right. So, can we talk about the puzzle, the overall plot?
Yeah.
Back to
Right,
Q.
right.
We've had a lot of mystery. We left Q at the first, within the first 30 minutes. We left Q.
Yeah.
Now Q comes back on board and is like, "Did you figure out the puzzle, you stupid, vicious humans?" So, explain to me the plot.
I mean, the whole thing is we've got these mysterious things, which I'm interested in. I want to know why the fabric appears when Crusher wants it. I want to know why the apple appears. Like the stuff going on there is interesting, and this whole emotion that she senses, but we don't get a real hint towards any solution. That's what I don't understand.
Oh, well, kind of. So I think what they're doing is they're alluding to the Q continuum, which we'll find out later what Q actually is. Q is not just one being. Q is a collective of beings. It's hard
Oh
to
my
grasp.
God. No. They did this in Rick and Morty, so I understand.
Oh, gotcha. So that's kind of what Troy was sensing as the Q collective, in that there is a lot of entities sort of working as one.
Okay.
Mixed with whatever was happening on the planet side, right? So the test was Q was testing humanity to see if they would make the correct decisions if everything was provided for them. If the circumstances were perfect in this scientific experiment, would humanity be good or would they be bad?
I was under the assumption that it was the creature itself, which was the base, it turned out, could produce matter out of energy.
Yes.
And was answering their desires.
Yes.
What does that have to do with Q?
The creature was being tortured. They were getting just a little drop of energy, which is what they feed on. And in exchange, they were making apples appear and perfect fabric.
Yes.
But they were just taking orders from anybody who was there. Right. And so this is why this society had trapped this giant floating jellyfish
because it was a replicator.
And built, it was a replicator, which is technology we'll find out about later. Yeah. I don't think it was in the original series, no?
I don't think so, no.
Oh, well, no. Don't quote me on that.
But before we find out that the space station, that the base on the planet is alive, and that's the secret, it is this thing of like, did you figure it out, Picard? Yeah. Did you figure it out? I'm not going to give you any hints. Figure it out.
One of the hints that we're given is that the alien ship that appears, a very UFO-looking alien ship.
Yeah, because it's what they had on the stock graphics in Maya for 3D.
Yeah, but it's way bigger than the Enterprise because they can just deal with ratio.
Scales. Yeah.
The hint being that it fires on the city as opposed to the station, right?
Yes. Well, so to kind of explain these questions and kind of break that down, if you were Q and you wanted to find something in this expanded universe to test the humans, this scenario would be the perfect scenario. So let's say we zoom out a bit and that Q is more like a dungeon master. This scenario, this adventure would be a perfect module to send my little humans on to sort of test them, right? And they can't complain that they didn't have everything they needed because these creatures are able to provide things.
But it doesn't even tell them they are creatures.
Exactly. So what he's trying to do is, what do you do with this lone person that is, or this society of people that is stranded? Do you destroy them to save this creature? Because that would be the thing, is that you sacrifice the many for the good of this one. Or do you sacrifice one for the good of many, which is the motif for like all of Star Trek.
But the one is way bigger, so it wins. And it's also two because it's girlfriend, mate.
Right. I wrote my note in all caps like, space jellyfish is what Star Trek is about.
Aww.
Well, that's the whole thing, is that this problem, Picard found a way. Kirk had the thing of there are no-win scenarios. There's something called the Kobayashi Maru, which is supposed to be this impossible thing, right, that he finds a solution for. That's sort of the basis of what Picard is doing. He's put in this difficult situation of explaining all of humanity's past transgressions, fixing this, and taking care of his crew. And he's got to do it all before Q does something mysterious like wipe them out of existence. So this is a no-win scenario that he's sort of negotiating and finding out a win for that helps everybody.
Oh my gosh, you really showed me how it fits into the larger picture.
Yeah.
I've heard of Kobayashi Maru.
Which is not the right way to say that, because I speak Japanese. It should be Kobayashi Maru, like circle, but whatever, I won't get into it.
So say it like that. There you go.
Oh, you'll piss off some Trekkies.
It's a battle simulation where some Klingon warbirds, or no, did I say warbirds?
Yeah,
is that Romulan?
Romulan warbirds.
Klingon, birds of prey.
Birds of prey.
Yeah, they attack. You pretty much are trying to evacuate the ship. You can't win.
Yeah, a no-win scenario. I've looked this up recently.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting that, of course, for people that need a refresher, what happens is Picard says, send all of our phaser energy down into the jellyfish that is trapped under this base on the planet, so it has enough power to fly away with its jellyfish mate, and they go off floating into the goodness
and they do
of
it
space.
Jellyfish style.
And they have sort of like these horse tails that one's slightly pink and one's slightly blue. And
height of computer graphics at the time.
They brush against each other in a very erotic way for an extended.
Oh, mine was pixelated when that happened. Yours was unedited?
Oh, ours?
No.
You got the censor bar.
Yeah, you got to get it uncut.
I have the parent guides on mine. Sorry.
Oh wow.
Got to get it raw.
I love kind of one of the last lines in the episode is the one that also kind of like brings us into the series, which is so some problem, Riker? Oh, just hoping this isn't the usual way our missions will go, sir. Oh no, number one. I'm sure it'll be much more interesting.
Yes, and then he says the thing. Every captain has a catchphrase.
Oh, yeah. And can we say it all together?
Actually, I don't know. Doesn't he not say his traditional catchphrase?
No, he does.
He does.
Well, he says one of them.
One word of it, I'm thinking in particular.
Exactly. He says,
Engage.
Exactly.
But it also
it's
say,
not make it so.
let's
but-
see what's out there or something. Was that not a line in there?
Hey,
Maybe.
they
Did I
can
make
all
that
be
up?
his catchphrases.
Yeah, he's got a lot of
Wubba lubba
catchphrases.
dub dub, you know?
Anyway, but when he says engage, I always go, he said the thing.
I sense us coming to the end, and there's one line that I wanted to mention that was my favorite. That's just going to be my last thing I got to say. It's when old Mark Twain, sorry, the original series, what's his name?
Mark Twain, you're right.
Yeah, Mark Twain.
Kelly?
Yeah.
McCoy is the
McCoy, Bones.
Yeah.
Bones.
He says,
Mark Twain makes an appearance later in the series.
oh yeah, that's true. And I have seen that episode. It's the one. He says in regards to the ship, treat her like a lady and she'll always bring you home.
Which is why Bones has no place on this Enterprise.
That's correct.
He called Data boy so many times.
Oh, God.
It
I
was
never
not
heard him
great.
call anyone boy.
Well, he was just being himself.
Yeah, he's gotten so crotchety, and he already was crotchety.
Yeah.
So, guys, that was episode 1, Encounter at Farpoint.
I am excited for the journey, the trek that you're about to go
Oh
on.
my God. One
and you have to
small
make
step
a big
for
decision.
Benzoid.
For a Betazoid. The big decision is, you don't know what the weight is, but are you a Trekker or are you a Trekkie? You don't have to answer now.
I'm a Trekkie.
Okay.
I've
What's the
never heard
difference?
Trekker before.
Well, we'll see. Just hold on to it.
Ooh.
Let's see what you'll get into the community. You'll make a decision for yourself whenever you want. And Jake's looking it up right now.
No, you can't because we got to close out the
I'm
episode.
not, but I'm telling you what we will be reviewing on our next episode,
Yeah?
which is episode 2 of season 1, which is called The Naked Now. I'll tell you the synopsis, which is the crew of the Enterprise is subjected to an exotic illness that drives them to an unusual manic behavior akin to a type of alcoholic intoxication. And let me tell you,
Ooh.
things get sexy.
Also,
Yeah.
I think we're going to need to have whiskey for that episode.
That's a good plan.
Couple of things that I would just want to quick fire these off. Some nods to original series. Geordi says sensors, which is a nod to how Spock or Leonard Nimoy used to pronounce the word sensors. I think that was about it. Anyway.
Okay, that's a good one. That's
Yeah.
a good factoid.
All right. Well, to sign off, we should send you to the Good Time Society Twitter, which is at Good Time Society.
And you should definitely visit our Patreon, which is patreon.com/join/goodtimesociety. I'll also have a link to both of those in the show notes. Thanks for joining us for To Boldly Watch. Did you guys have a good time?
I had a real good time.
This is all I ever want to do.
This was way more fun than I thought it would be.
I'm glad. Welcome to Star Trek.
Yeah, guys.
We're getting into it.
When it comes to this, let's see what's out there.
Engage.
Just boldly watch.
You said the thing.
Bye.
Bye.